I want to ask you something we talked about before. You've said that part of the forgotten history of housing is the difference between de facto segregation and intentional state-sponsored segregation in residential housing. Again, because I think taking action requires a greater understanding, can you explain the difference between those two things for us one more time and explain to us why that distinction is important?
Well, the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Roberts, as I explained earlier, had it right. If this all happened by accident, there's no constitutional obligation to fix it. It can only happen by accident. So the myth of de facto segregation, that the reason we're segregated is simply because people choose to live with each other of the same race or because there was private discrimination, that paralyzes our ability to address it. If it was really the case that segregation happened by accident, then you could make a case that it would be unconstitutional to fix it. But since that's a complete and utter myth that it happened by accident, since could not have happened without the federal government and state and local governments, as I described in the example of police action, if it were not, because it's the case that federal, state, and local policy was essential to creating, maintaining, reinforcing, perpetuating racial segregation, we have a constitutional obligation to redress it. That's called de jure segregation. Segregation that's as unconstitutional as the segregation of public accommodations or any of the things that we addressed in the 20th century. And that knowledge that we have a constitutional obligation as American citizens, all of us, to redress residential segregation is a first step in creating the motivation to do something about it. It's going to be painful because it's a lot easier to desegregate water fountains or lunch counters than it is to desegregate residential segregation. The other forms of segregation that we abolished in the 20th century, you prohibit segregation in restaurants, and the next day you can sit anywhere you want in any restaurant. You abolish segregation in neighborhoods, the next day things wouldn't look much different. So we need policies, explicit policies that address this. Some of them will be costly, some of them will be no cost at all, but we need the policies to do so.